Alright, so in this video we're going to be reviewing how to solve these problems for our test on rational expressions. So let's go ahead and get started. First off, we have x squared plus 8x plus 4. And in order to simplify these, we need to first factor. So in this first one, you can actually take out the GCF of 4, and you're left with x squared plus 2x plus 1. And then the x plus 1 stays on the bottom. Now you need to factor the trinomial here. So you're looking for two numbers that when you multiply you get 1, and when you add you get 2. So those two numbers are 1, and then you pull over your x's, and then you do the x plus 1 on the bottom. One of the x plus 1's cancel, and you're just left with the 4 times x plus 1 on the top. For number 2, you want to factor all of the expressions. So I'm going to factor this first trinomial. And I'm looking for two numbers that when I multiply I get negative 5, and when I add I get negative 4. Those two numbers are 1 and negative 5, and then I put in my x's. On the bottom, my two numbers are negative 1 and negative 2. Two numbers that when I multiply I get 2, and when I add I get negative 3. And now for x squared minus 4, that is a difference of squares, which means I take the square root of x squared, which is x, I take the square root of 4, which is 2, and I do a plus and a minus. And then finally, factoring the last trinomial, I'm looking for two numbers that when I multiply I get negative 10, and when I add I get negative 3. Those two numbers are negative 5 and positive 2. Now I can cross out the negative 5's, the plus 2's, and the minus 2's, and I'm basically left with x plus 1 over x minus 1. For the next one, the top 2x minus 10, I'm just going to factor out a GCF, so I'm left with x minus 5. On the bottom, I want to factor out a 3, so I'm left with x minus 7. For the second one, I just leave the x minus 5, and I factor out a 4 from the 4x minus 28, and I'm left with 4 times x minus 7, and 4 times x minus 7. Okay, so now since these are actually division, I want to go ahead now and I want to flip the second ones. So it's actually going to be 2 times x minus 5, and then the 4 times x minus 7 is going to go on the top. And then I'm going to keep the 3 times x minus 7 on the bottom, and I'm going to put the x minus 5 on the bottom. So now my x minus 5's cancel, my x minus 7's cancel, 2 times 4 is 8, and then I'm still left with my 3. So 8/3 is my answer. For number 4 is multiplication, so now I just have to factor all of these. So I'm going to factor out a 2 first, and I'm going to be left with x squared plus 3x minus 18. And then I'm going to factor the x squared plus 4x. That gives me x plus 6 times x minus 2. The x plus 4, there's nothing to factor, so I'm just going to bring that over. And the 10x minus 30, I'm going to take out a 10, and I'm going to be left with x minus 3. Now I need to factor this polynomial here. And two numbers that when I multiply get 18 and adding get 3 are negative 3 and positive 6. And now I can go ahead and cancel. I have an x plus 6 here and an x plus 6 here. I have an x minus 3 here and an x minus 3 here. So basically, and then I have my 10 and my 2, which I can cross cancel to get 1 and 5. So I'm left with, on the top, I'm left with x plus 4. And on the bottom, I am left with 5 times x minus 2. Alright, moving on. Okay, so this is division, so I'm going to first factor and flip. So I'm going to factor this first one as x plus 8 and x plus 2. On the bottom, I'm going to factor as x plus 6 and x plus 2. And now I'm going to flip the second one. So this x plus 8 is actually going to go on the bottom. And then I'm going to factor x squared minus 64, which I can recognize as a difference of squares, and put it on the top. So x minus 8, x plus 8. And now I cancel. Plus 8, 2, 2. So I'm left with x plus, whoops, this one should have been an x minus 8. Excuse me, x minus 8. That one should have been x minus 8. So x minus 8 and x minus 8, and I'm left with x plus 8, and that's it. And finally, my last one, I am going to x minus 7, x plus 6. That's how I factor the top. The bottom is a difference of squares. So x plus 7, x minus 7. And cancel the x minus 7s, and I'm left with x plus 6 over x plus 7. Okay, so again, these are just factoring and canceling what's in common. Moving on to the horizontal vertical asymptotes and also domain and range. Horizontal asymptote is always in terms, I just realized that these are flipped. On your paper, vertical asymptote actually comes first. So vertical asymptote is going to be x equals 0, that's how it is for all of them, and y equals 3. So the vertical asymptote you find by when this bottom is 0. The horizontal asymptote is whatever is added when there's no variable on top. Domain is just going to be all real numbers except your value of 0. Range, all real numbers except the 3. Over here to the next one, again, these are flipped for some reason, but just know that the vertical asymptote for this one is going to be x equals negative 4, and the horizontal y equals negative 2. Domain and range, domain is all real numbers, except negative 4. Range, all real numbers, except negative 2. Okay, so 9 is a little bit different now. 9 you have two variables. You have one on the top and one on the bottom. So the one that's going to change here, and again, sorry, these are flipped, the horizontal asymptote is now going to be determined by those coefficients. So 1 over 1, that means your horizontal asymptote is going to be y equals 1. And your vertical asymptote is going to be x equals 2. Domain and range again, domain all real numbers except 2. And range is all real numbers except 1. Alright. Okay, so I just went ahead and did number 10 for you. You can go ahead and check that one. It's just like number 7 and 8. Let's move on. I'm going to go ahead and just fill in the answers for all of these so that you can check them. You do them the same way as we did the other ones. So number 11, you're looking at a horizontal asymptote of y equals positive 2/5, and vertical asymptote is going to be when negative 5x minus 3 equals 0. So if I solve that, I'm going to get 5x equals 3 of x equals 3/5. Okay, so domain, all real numbers except x equals 3/5. And range is all real numbers except 2/5. Okay? Alright, so you might want to go ahead and pause this video in order to check your answers for numbers 11 through 14. But we are going to move on to the graphing problems now. Alright, so for each of these we're going to look for the x and y intercepts. And we're going to do domain range, and we're going to talk about asymptotes. Okay? So first of all, let's talk about the asymptotes here. Your asymptotes for your x is going to be when 2x minus 1 equals 0. So x equals 1/2. So that's going to be your first asymptote, which is going to go right down here. Your y asymptote is just going to be determined, which is your horizontal, by the coefficients of x, which is 3/2, which is 1.5. And now you know your graph is going to be up in this quadrant and down in this quadrant. And so therefore you can now look for the intercepts. So for the x-intercept, it's when y equals 0. So therefore you're going to say 0 equals 3x plus 5 over 2x minus 1. Well, 2x minus 1 times 0 is just 0. So I can just cross that out basically, and it's going to be 0 equals 3x plus 5. Subtract 5 from both sides. Negative 5 equals 3x, divide by 3. And x equals negative 5/3. So that's your x-intercept. Your y-intercept is when x equals 0. So therefore you're just going to substitute 0 in for 3 times 0 plus 5 over 2 times 0 minus 1. Anything times 0 is 0, so now it's just 5 over negative 1, which is negative 5. Alright, so that's exactly the process you're going to use with all of the problems. So for the next one, you want to do the same thing. We'll do one more together. For number 16, which it looks like it's actually something got changed here. So this is actually number 16 down here. So sorry about that. We have 4 over 2x minus 4 plus 3. So our y horizontal asymptote is going to be y equals 3. My x asymptote is going to be when 2x minus 4 equals 0. So add 4, and I get 2x equals 4, divide by 2, and x equals 2. So that's going to be my vertical. So here's my vertical, x equals 2. And my horizontal is y equals 3. And I know it's going to be on this quadrant and in this quadrant. And now to find my intercepts, I'm going to go up here. X-intercept is when y equals 0. So it's going to be 0 equals 4 over 2x minus 4 plus 3. I'm going to first subtract 3 from both sides. So negative 3 equals 4 over 2x minus 4. Multiply both sides by 2x minus 4. And so you're going to distribute that negative 3, so it'll be negative 6x plus 12 equals 4. And minus 12, negative 6x equals negative 8. Divide by negative 6, and x equals 4/3. So 4/3 is your x-intercept. Your y-intercept is just when x is 0, which you can see it's going to be 4 over negative 4. That's negative 1, and negative 1 plus 3 is 2. So your y-intercept is equal to 3. I'm sorry. Your y-intercept is equal to 2. Alright, so we're going to move on. I'm just going to go ahead and post the rest of them, and then you can check your work. Alright, so for number 17, just in case you're having a hard time reading it, this is 15 over 2, and this is your y-intercept here, which is 1. And your asymptotes are 1/2 and negative 15/4. And you can see your asymptotes labeled here, and then your x-asymptote is labeled here as negative 15/4. I'm going to pause it. Number 18. For number 18, you can see all of here's your x-intercept down here. You have no y-intercept. X equals 0, y equals negative 4 for the asymptotes, and again labeled on your graph. Same thing down here. Your x-intercept is 0, your y-intercept is 0. Here's your asymptotes, domain and range, and your graph. Again, if you want to pause it. And finally, number 20, same thing. Your y-intercept is negative 2. Your x-intercept is 2. And your asymptotes are 3/4 and negative 2. Domain and range, and your graph. If you have any questions, please let Mrs. Conway know.